In the lands between, there are legends. Tales of demigods and heroes, of shattering wars and forgotten gods. But few names echo with as much might and as much tragedy as Starscourge Radahn. You may know him from the Festival of War. You may know him as the general who commands gravity itself, or the demigod who rides a horse far too small for his frame. Or perhaps you simply know him as the reason you saw the words "you died" more times than you can count. But who was this monumental figure, really? Why was he wasting away in the blighted desert? Why did he challenge the very stars in the sky? To understand the man, we must go back to the beginning. Back to a time before the rot and before the war. Radahn was one of 3 children born to Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, and the champion, Radahn of the Golden Order. While his mother was the head of a magical dynasty, the master of the Raya Lucaria Academy, Radahn inherited more from his father. He had his father's fiery red hair and, more importantly, his warrior spirit. But Radahn's true idol was not his father. It was another man entirely, Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. From a young age, Radahn was captivated by the sheer unbridled strength of Godfrey. He was such a devoted fan that he adorned his own armor with the image of a lion, Godfrey's signature sigil, a symbol of untamed might he so admired. The world, however, was in a state of flux. Godfrey, after winning all his wars, was paradoxically stripped of his grace and exiled from the lands between. And soon after, Queen Marika the Eternal will turn her gaze towards Radahn's own family. She took his father, Radahn, to be her new husband, her second Elden Lord. And with this union, Radahn and his siblings were elevated. They became demigods. Becoming a demigod had its consequences. Radahn grew to a colossal size, so large, in fact, that he could no longer ride his beloved scrawny steed, a companion he cherished deeply. But Radahn would not abandon his loyal friend. Instead, he chose to bend the very laws of reality to his will. He traveled to the town of Celia to study under an alabaster lord, a master of gravitational sorcery. He poured himself into this new discipline, not for power, not for conquest, but for the simple, heartfelt reason of wanting to continue riding his horse. He learned to manipulate his own weight, to become as light as a feather, all for the sake of companionship. He became so proficient, his mastery grew so absolute, that he was no longer just a conqueror of the battlefield. He became the conqueror of gravity itself. His power reached a point where he could achieve the unthinkable. He held the very stars in the sky frozen in their tracks, halting the movement of fate itself. But why? Why would a demigod challenge the cosmos? For a long time, this was a mystery. It is only now, with the new whispers from the land of shadow, that we can speculate on the true reason. Radahn's half-brother, Miquella, was an Empyrean. a being chosen as a candidate to ascend to full godhood. But he was not the only one. Another one, his half-sister, Ranni, also walked this path. Miquella, in his ambition, sought to clear the way for his own ascension. In a memory, he makes a proposition to Radahn.
Lord brother, I'm going to be a god. If we honor our part of the vow, promise me you'll be my consort. I'll make the world a gentler place.
A god, you see, needs a lord, a consort. By halting the stars, Radahn was directly interfering with Ranni's destiny, a fate written in the constellations. He was clearing the board for his brother in an act of loyalty that would bind their futures together. Then the world broke. Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring, an act of supreme betrayal that saw her imprisoned within the Erdtree. With no ruler on the throne, the demigods, each holding a shard of the broken ring, fell to greed and ambition. The Shattering war began. Starscourge Radahn was at the height of his power, leading the fearless Redmane Knights, one of the greatest armies the lands between had ever seen. The war raged, and one by one, the Shardbearers fell until only 2 titans remained. Radahn, the mightiest demigod, and Malenia, blade of Miquella. They met on the battlefield of Caelid, a clash of titans that shook the very foundation of the continent. But the battle reached a stalemate. Neither could overwhelm the other. In a final desperate act, Malenia unleashed her hidden curse. She detonated a grey flower of scarlet rot, poisoning the land, the sky, and Radahn himself. Caelid will never recover, and neither would Radahn. The rot ate away at his mind, leaving him a mindless, raving beast, wandering the desert that was once his home. Yet, in that moment of defeat, as the rot bloomed, a voice whispered to him a promise from his brother. Miquella awaits thee, O Promised Consort. The battle, it seems, was not an unforeseen tragedy. It was part of a plan, a sacrifice designed for Radahn to fall, only to be reborn elsewhere. Years pass. The once proud General Radahn is now a monster, a shadow of his former self. It is here that we meet Castellan Gerran, his old friend and guest general. He hosts a festival of war. But this is no celebration. It is a funeral rite. So, why would his dearest friend host a festival to have him killed? The reason is a tragic one. Honor. Gerran and Radahn had sworn a pact that if one should ever fall from grace, the other would ensure they received a true warrior's death. The festival was not an act of betrayal. It was Gerran's final act of friendship, an organized mercy killing to give the greatest warrior of the age the honorable end he deserved. And with his death, the stars he held captive are finally released, continuing their cosmic journey and allowing a certain witch to continue hers. But in the lands between, death is a complicated thing. The rune of death had been removed from the Elden Ring long ago. So, was Radahn truly gone? No. His soul journeyed to the land of shadow, drawn by the promise of his brother. There, Miquella took the soul of the fallen general and infused it into the body of Mog, Lord of Blood, rebirthing him. He was reborn as Promised Consort Radahn. Not a mindless beast, but the champion in his prime, ready to fulfill his vow. And here is where things get truly interesting. Some believe Radahn was merely bewitched, a puppet to Miquella's charm, but the evidence suggests something deeper. During our final confrontation in the Land of Shadow, Miquella divests himself of his Great Rune, an act that breaks his charm over all others. Yet, Radahn continues to fight by his side. This was not coercion, this was loyalty. This was a promise kept. In the heat of the final battle, as he fights to protect his brother's ascent to godhood, something changes. His name shifts from Promised Consort Radahn to Radahn, Consort of Miquella. The promise was fulfilled. The marriage was made. And in the end, they fall together. The story of Starscourge Radahn is one of immense power, of deep loyalty and profound tragedy. A demigod who conquered gravity for his horse, who held the stars for his brother, and who received a warrior's death from his friend, only to be reborn to fulfill one final promise. A true legend of the lands between.